recording. Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Flood and Water Management Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Tom Ashton, I'm the Vice Chairman of this committee, and I'm chairing until the Chairman gets here. I understand he's running a few minutes late. The audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast via the County Council website, and a warm welcome to members of the public and press watching live today. I would like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we will need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait until further instructions. Before we move on further with the main business of this meeting, can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent. We will now move on to the formal agenda. The first item, which is apologies for absence, and I'll hand over to Tom for that.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Martin from East Lindsey District Council.
Thank you. Second item is declaration of councillors' interest. Do any member wish to declare any interests that have not been declared on their pecuniary interest? Seeing none, thank you. If anything does crop up in the course of the meeting, please do flag it then. Minutes of the previous meeting of the Flood and Water Management Scrutiny Committee held 23rd of May 2022. Turning to pages 5 to 10 of the agenda pack, we are looking to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Do I have a proposer for that, please? Thank you very much, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Haig. You were just in there ahead of Councillor Ashley Morris. We will now vote on the minutes. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you, Councillor Baxter. That is clearly carried. Item 4, announcement by the Chairman, Executive Council, Councillors and Lead Officers. As you will have noticed, it has been a while since our last committee meeting in May. Our previously scheduled meeting in September had to be cancelled due to the sad news of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Therefore, as you would appreciate, there is a wide range of schemes and projects that we will receive updates from today by officers and partners. Therefore, I would like to ask members to pose succinct questions and make concise contributions to allow for all matters to be discussed in depth. Officers and partners presenting today are also requested to summarise the key points of their reports and presentations and of what is required by the committee, as all reports should be taken as read. I would also like to mention that last Friday, 18th of November, FloodX took place at the County Emergency Centre, and the exercise was facilitated by the emergency planning team. I was very pleased to be able to attend that exercise, and looking around the room, other members of this committee were able to take part as well. I think the one lesson I certainly take from that exercise is that it is far better to prepare and prevent that kind of emergency than it is to have to clear up after it and to go through what would clearly be an incredibly painful experience for the people involved and for the rest of Lincolnshire likewise. But a very, very useful exercise and something I'm very pleased to be part of. Lastly, I would acknowledge that we have Pete Riley of the Environment Agency attending today virtually, who has kindly joined us to discuss the issue reported at Council and further at Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee in September in relation to the high levels of weeds and dead fish in the River Witham in the Boston area over the summertime. We move to Executive Councillor announcements. Are there any announcements from Councillor Davey, the Executive Councillor for Economic Development, Environment and Planning, please?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chairman. Thank you very much, Chairman. I just want to echo your comments regarding FloodX. It was a very useful exercise and obviously a very deep-reaching one in terms of implications for Lincolnshire. I think it would be useful once the team of the LRF have compiled the report on that we share that with members of this committee so they understand the complexities but also the implications of a major coastal flooding event. I'll move on briefly. A couple of other items I want to mention. On the 9th of November, the Greater Lincolnshire Groundwater Project received its letter of award of grant to deliver the project under the DEFRA-funded Flood and Coastal Resilience Innovation Programme. This follows a successful assurance exercise of our outlined business case. The grant award is for £7,184,000 and the project will now deliver against this allocation between now and March 2027. We have recently appointed a Flood Resilience Programme Coordinator to help support the delivery of the project, which is in addition to the existing Community Engagement Officer appointed through the National Flood Forum, who has already been meeting with communities in Grimsby and Scotwick as part of the project pilot areas. Consultants are also shortly to commence a review of the existing Lincolnshire chalk and limestone models to better understand the implications of groundwater across the whole Greater Lincolnshire area. Lincolnshire County Council, working in collaboration with other organisations, will now work to deliver against the wider project objectives to create a better understanding of groundwater and how it can be managed both in terms of flood risk and resources. In the process, we'll improve the resilience of those three trial communities in Scotwick, Grimsby and Barton-on-Humber. I'm sure members will be delighted to hear the news of the confirmation of the funding and of our business case, and we'll keep reporting back to you as this project progresses. Following last week's rainfall, we received reports of 7 properties being internally flooded, with 1 in Skegness, 1 in Middle Raisin, 2 in Market Raisin and 3 in Tealby. Formal S19 investigations have been instigated, and this is still, however, a developing picture, and obviously members will be aware of the weather forecast for this week, which talks of constant high levels of rainfall. This will be in addition to Section 19 and recent rainfall event updates that have appeared in Matthew Harrison's report to the committee. In the flood teams, we are working closely with highways and partner organisations to look for any resolution to the issues in parallel to the formal investigation process. And finally, our officers continue to gather information that will be shaping our response to the non-statutory consultation on the proposed Lincolnshire Reservoir by Anglian Water, which is in advance of the consultation deadline on the 12th of December. We will obviously report back to this committee on further movements on that issue. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to take any questions members may have.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davey. Incredibly grateful for your report. Councillors, do you have any questions that you would like to raise with Councillor Davey? Seeing none, thank you very much for that, Councillor Davey. We'll just quickly move on to senior officers. Are there any announcements from the lead officers, Justin Brown, Chris Miller, Vanessa Strange?
None indicating, thank you.
Apologies for being late, committee, owing to a road traffic accident. So moving on to item 5. I'd like to ask for an update on the flood risk team and indeed invite Matthew to take us through that. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. So this is the item for the update from the flood risk team, particularly focusing on the Section 19 investigation reports, but any other relevant updates that the team are involved with at the moment. If I may, I will take the report as read, but just pick up on a few pertinent points to bring to the attention of committee. You will notice that we were working on a backlog of Section 19 investigations, and the fine weather over the summer did allow us to catch up with that backlog. But inevitably, we suspected that that weather would break, and unfortunately it did on the 16th and 17th of August, where some severe storms affected Lincolnshire, well, many parts of the country, but obviously relevant to ourselves, affected Lincolnshire, particularly badly hit were areas around Market Raisin and the south of the county around the Spalding area. So that generated a significant number of Section 19 investigations. I'm pleased to say that with the streamlined and reviewed processes that we have, that we were able to action many of those quite quickly, and reports are well underway. In fact, some have already been completed. Unfortunately, then we experienced some further heavy rainfall in October, which again generated some further Section 19 investigations, and has been just updated by Councillor Davey in his report just this last week as well. So after a period of very dry weather over the summer and the drought, unfortunately the heavy rainfall is now starting to cause some issues. Some of the rainfall that was experienced in August was exceptional. As has been pointed out to me, that's probably an overused word when we talk about some of the rainfall totals, but I think if you'll agree that if you see some of the figures that were reported in my report and on the maps, particularly around the Spalding area, Market Raisin, there was some very significant rainfall in a very short space of time, which inevitably was going to cause some problems. So the outcome of the Section 19 reports will obviously highlight those issues and any organisations that may be able to look at resolution of those matters. I would just say that in the Floods and Water team, we're also working closely with colleagues in Highways, our Highways department internally, as well as other partner organisations, to see if there are any resolution we can bring to some of these issues as quickly as possible, because it's been a very traumatic time for many people affected by the flooding, particularly those who have been had to move out of their home as a consequence of being internally flooded. So our thoughts are with them. Just moving on to some other work streams. I won't repeat what Councillor Davey has said, but in my report you will notice I did just flag up an update on the Greater Lincolnshire Groundwater Project. Things have obviously moved on since the report was written, and I am pleased to say that we have the grant award now, as Councillor Davey highlighted, and therefore the project team will be now moving that forward. Also just pleased to say that good news story in that we were successfully completed on time the flood alleviation works at Scothen, which was part of the Development Fund programme that had previously been awarded to us, and also just some good community benefits that was nice to see out of that, with the contractor working with the academy in the village with some reading benches, which all was really worked well with the parish council, and we had a really good working relation with the contractor on that one, which has delivered some much needed betterment to the village of Scothen. So I'm pleased to report that on the completion of that project. I'll leave it for now. Leave it there for now, if I may, Chairman. I'm sure there'll be some questions from the report, which of course, as always, I'm more than pleased to answer. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that report, Matthew. I've got a list of people that are wanting to speak. Before doing so, it's good to have received the list where we are with the Section 19 situations, indeed, and to note the updates that you've given us. And it's also particularly pleasing to see and include Sue Whitton, who's the Senior Emergency Planning and Business Community Officer, attending in purpose. So it's good to have you here. And I'm fully aware of some of the very concerning flooding issues that's been going on around the county. And I think it would be right and proper that Steve Bunny's given the opportunity. First, we've had dialogues since these unfortunate events have happened. I know full well what they're like as a councillor to undertake the conduit between the misfortune and indeed trying to help people, and the support that is needed as the lead flood authority in doing that. So Steve and Councillor Stephen Bunny, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I also attended the flood exercise on Friday, and from that came one or two points which I think were actually quite useful in my thinking over the weekend. As we've already heard, prepare and prevent is an important thing that we should be looking at, and also that we have the problems of dealing with the issue at the point and then the recovery stage. This is the bit which concerns me a little bit. In Market Raisin, as you know, we've had flooding both in August, a little bit in October, but nothing serious, and actually in November on Thursday. The one on Thursday, when I was out with two households, I felt very sorry for those individuals, both of whom had probably been flooded 6 times since 2020. And this is to do with surface runoff, not the river flooding, though there is a link on one of them. The point is that those families now are almost at breaking point, if not already reached that breaking point. They live, every time the heavy rain comes, they are anxious, they are extremely upset, and I believe they've reached the critical threshold point. It might be that their properties aren't that seriously flooded, but to them it is a major issue. One of the families which was moved, well, they're still able to be in there, but were having to throw their new carpets out, which had been put in 2 days before, and had only moved back into that property a week before the flooding. And I think actually they would have flooded in October if it hadn't been for the fact that they were already out of the property and the insurance company were pumping the water there. My concern is that we have Section 19 reports, and I'm really grateful for what we've heard this morning. I could add actually another 2 properties in Market Raisin since Friday, but I'll take that up later. But the issue is that these reports identify what might need to be doing and what needs to be done, but we're not actually getting the action done. And it's very difficult when you've been flooded 6 times and they're still waiting for reports back from 2019. One of them says a report from 2007. We know what the issues are. We've got a number of little short-term events, solutions, which might not be the big solutions that we see in these other areas, but I think are important for those individual households. And I feel we need to be looking at how we can do that across the agencies. I appreciate it's not just the lead flood agency, and I appreciate that it comes into planning and all sorts of things. But the fact is, we can pass the buck from one to another all the time, but not get anywhere with getting those properties resilient for future flooding, which hopefully won't happen this week, but who knows. My concern also on that is that we did have a £5,000 scheme to help with the resilience for those individual buildings. That was a pilot. I'm not sure quite where we are on it, but I know that those funds aren't particularly available at the moment, and people then are redirected to the insurance company, which is Flood Re or whatever, I think is the setup. But those don't seem to be coming forward very easily. They are difficult to do. And if you're faced with this family, for instance, who had their carpets moved with 2 young children, they know that for £20,000 they could probably build a flood tank down at the bottom of their house. But that might not sort the neighbours out. They've already spent quite a bit of money. That must admit, they did get 5,000 from West Lindsey when they were managing that project, but we didn't resolve the problem. And that money needs to be there. They can see millions of pounds going into other projects, which I'm sure deserve that money. Don't get me wrong, we're not preventing that. But for those small individuals who are a result of surface flooding are in a difficulty there. I do think there's an issue to do with the coordination of the emergency teams. That, I think, comes through emergency plan. We have been working on it, and I have to say we haven't got it absolutely right, but I do feel that by asking some questions and working forward on that, we're moving in the right direction. And certainly on Thursday, we had a better response working together than we might have done in August, when we all seemed to be doing everything we could, but not actually in a joint situation. But my main thrust of all this is that I think for those individuals who are Section 19 just 1 or 2, even though we had 80 flooded in August, that we can identify 2 or 3 which are regularly flooding, and they are at breaking point. And a lot of it is not always their fault, though clearly it's now affecting their buildings very seriously, and I worry for their health and of the health of the community.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bunny. To me, I think this falls into 3 categories, really. Action is the first thing when these misfortunate situations happen. Response, as you've spoken about. I sit in this chair still with some disappointment that in prevention of further flooding, before we actually get to that, when we have these misfortunate incidents that occur, and like yourself and many other members here, we have been in those situations. What we've been trying to work to is all 7 districts coming to a memorandum of understanding, so that when these situations occur, we have a joined up approach and that we're not all trying to do the same thing. In other words, raising the same inquiries to the same person, that there is, as we are the lead flood authority, that we coordinate exactly where we are. I'd like to have hoped that that agreement had been made and been signed off. I have asked my officer on the left here, Kyra, to actually accentuate that, and she will indeed be doing that. So that's really where we are with the prevention category. And of course, then you mentioned people's individual insurance. We're also mindful and know where insurance companies are concerned with people with flood risk and the perils of it, that to get renewed insurance becomes that much more difficult as well. So right across the situation, it is something that I know is most earnest, and I hope that we will be able to further address this, to be fair. So thank you, Councillor Baxter, and I've noted that you wish to speak as well. If I could now turn to Councillor Fleetwood, who would like to come in. Councillor Fleetwood.
Thank you, Chairman. You've no doubt heard this one from me before, but I'll bat the same drum again. And Section 19, I have every sympathy for anybody that's had water in their property, in their houses, but I'm so concerned about those near misses, the ones that are nearly Section 19, the ones where the water's got into the shed, the conservatory, the garage. A lot of people keep an awful lot of their assets in the garage, yet Section 19 doesn't actually record those issues. I'm even more concerned now, though, because as time moves on, Lincolnshire is low-lying land. As we know, there's an awful lot of drainage boards out there. Drainage boards are typically using electric pumps, and we keep hearing about energy prices and energy crises. So the issue is, if by chance the national grid was to go down, which we keep hearing there might be some outages in the winter, if indeed the drainage boards can't afford to pay for the electricity to run for these pumps, it's going to put more emphasis on the properties that are not quite flooded but will flood if some of those facilities, those pump facilities, aren't operating. So I think we do need to very much keep our eye on the ball of these near misses and do something about it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fleetwood. I think when we get to the proposal, we'll go through just some action notes to be attached with that. Can I next ask Councillor Austin? She's indicated to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, near misses. How long have we been recording near misses? I could have backdated goodness knows how many near misses since 2013 when I joined this council in places like Frampton, Middlegate Road, some more in Curtin. So I'm just wondering, because it says collated between 2012 and Q2 of 2022, but I don't think we were ever made aware that you could actually report a near miss as a flooding incident. Well, I suppose we probably did report it, but I don't think nobody ever took any notice of them. Right, I think it's Matt in front of me, isn't it? Yes, I can't tell from the back of the head. Am I right in thinking that we've not had any problems in Curtin this summer? I don't see the word Curtin in this report anywhere. Is that a thing of the past now? Is everything finished? I haven't been into Curtin in the last week to know whether the traffic lights have finally gone. Could you just, confirm that everything is finished and it's all in the past now?
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Austin, for that. Yes, as regards Curtin, there have been a small amount of remedial works to finish off there, which were ongoing whilst this report was in progress. So just to provide an update post-report, just in the last few days, I can confirm that the work is all now completed in Curtin. Contractors have left site and there shouldn't be a reason to revisit the site now. Everything is sorted. And also, I'm pleased to say I am not aware of any flooding issues reported in the village over the summer. So hopefully, as we set out to do, the scheme has done its job. So no flooding issues reported in Curtin. If I may, I'll just pick up on the near miss, Chairman, as well at this point. So near misses are gathered from a range of information. Some of that can be anecdotal evidence from council members, for example, members of the public, other colleagues. It's sometimes information that is obtained from the highways teams where they have confirmed logs reported to them as, for example, road flooding or driveways and things like that. But as has been pointed out, these are classed as near misses because they don't trigger the formal Section 19 investigation criteria, which is properties internally flooded. The information that you see presented in the report hasn't been routinely collated over that period of time. That's something that some of the members in my team have actually backtracked over the records to collate this information, so we now have it available to us. So that's been quite an undertaking, but it's a valuable undertaking because what that does, as Councillor Fleetwood rightly pointed out, is that it highlights to us where there are potential issues that could cause internal flooding, albeit of a worse event in the future. So it's very valuable information. It can help shape the thinking of ourselves in the floods and water team, highways colleagues, other organisations as to where intervention might be required. Just to give some context, the numbers of near-miss reports that have been collated is well into their thousands, so it is significant over that period of time. But they're not formal reports like a Section 19 investigation, but nonetheless, it is still valuable information that we've obtained from a number of sources and is very worthwhile documenting and collating that, which is what we've begun to do. I hope that helps clarify.
Thank you very much. I think we'll see where we get to at the end of debate. So, do you want to come back, Councillor Austin?
There was one further question. Now that it's all over, dare I ask, how much did the Curtin scheme cost in the end? Have you got any idea, please, Matt?
The payment schedules are still being sorted with the contractor and the projects team at the moment, but early indications are that it has come in potentially under budget, but I'm awaiting for the final figures on that.
No sort of guess?
I'm afraid I've not been party to those discussions because that's being sorted directly with the contractor and the project team that ran the project. But more than happy to take that away and update when I have that information. But at present, I'm afraid I've not been party to those discussions.
Okay, I think, well, we don't need to wait for the next meeting for that then, Matthew. Let's have that circulated before then. Thank you very much. Councillor Clark, I think you were indicated next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. From the minutes from the last meeting, under the flood risk team update, including section 19, it stated responsibility for drainage at Crosscliff Hill, Lincoln, was not clear between the City Council and the County Council. Officers have agreed to investigate this matter further. That was 6 months ago. I haven't heard any more from it, but the point is here, if there's a dike and there's two authorities that can't decide who owns it, what chance have we got of telling farmers, etc., that those dikes are theirs? So, really, is there an update?
Okay, fine. I think all of us experience sometimes the same difficulties to do with drainage boards, in particular, as well as other agencies, and in fact getting people to come together with a collated response and the way forward. However, I suppose, Matthew, I need an undertaking that you will be able to either answer today or indeed explain to Councillor Clark and the rest of the committee why for 6 months we're still awaiting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And Councillor Clark, I can only apologise. I thought the matter had been taken forward. So the fact that you haven't had anything fed back, I will certainly look into that. From memory, this was potential riparian responsibilities between the two authorities or local landowners. So I will take that away as an action again, and my apologies. I thought this matter had been taken forward. So if you would leave that with me, I will chase that up for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I think it's also opportune for me to be able to say in my late coming in today's meeting, one of the other situations which we're all disappointed in is that owing to DEFRA's fundings, that the Environment Agency finds itself under more pressure to actually enforce riparian rights, and I think that later in the meeting, as a committee, I'd like to enforce our representation as to the importance of that. However, that is to be processed later. Can I call upon Councillor Baxter now? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to rewind a little bit. Councillor Bunny asked quite a long and detailed question about the situation for the properties that have been flooded 6 times.
In Market Raisin, yes.
In Market Raisin. And you responded, I mean, I'm still relatively new to these situations, but as chair, who are you responding on behalf of? Are you responding on behalf of the council, or are you, have you already had the conversations before the meeting? If not, is it not appropriate to allow officers to respond to Councillor Bunny as well? That's my first question. My second question is about Spalding. If we look on page 16, Spalding suffered 18 streets affected and 37 properties. Is it possible for someone to sum up in a nutshell how this happened, and is it likely to happen again? Is there any action going to be taken between now and the next heavy rainfall?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Baxter. I thought I was conducting the meeting that was an inclusion of officers as well as members, so I apologise if I hadn't made that clarity absolutely clear. Before moving on to addressing your issue about Spalding, Matthew, is there anything further that you wish to come back? I didn't see any indication, but I'm inviting you to do so.
No, thank you, Chairman. What I would say is Councillor Bunny raised some very valid points there, and we have spoken offline as well. So one thing that is worth reiterating, as has been pointed out before, is that Section 19 investigation is a statutory duty that we have, and that's to investigate the flooding. Of course, that doesn't bring a resolution to the problem at all. That's to identify the causation of the flooding and those organisations that might have some responsibility within that. And I just think that is an expectation for people to be clear on. The resolution still lies with the relevant risk management authorities, whoever that may be. And some of the some examples that, for example, came out of the August event, there were some localised issues in the Spalding area with some riparian ditches and watercourses where we collectively worked with internal drainage boards to bring some quite quick fix resolutions at the time. And there are one or two other examples of that as well. Equally with the August event, some of the information that I've had fed back preliminary from the investigations is, if you look at the amounts of rainfall that were experienced, which is highlighted in the report, they probably exceeded, in many cases, modern design standards. So we can't say for certain that there aren't issues. There certainly are some recurring issues, as Councillor Bunny's quite rightly pointed out, and they need to be the priority moving forward. I've spoken to residents myself in recent weeks who have been displaced from their home because of the flooding, and it's a very distressing time, which is fully understood. So if there's resolution we can bring to this as quickly as possible, that will always be the focus. But we can't lose sight of the fact that some of the rainfall totals that were received, particularly in the Spalding area and Market Raisin, have probably exceeded modern design standards by some way. So inevitably we're going to cause some problems. That probably is evidenced by the fact that in some situations where the water stood for a period of time during that rainfall, it then actually drained away quite quickly afterwards. It wasn't stood around for days. To indicate that the systems were working, but they just simply couldn't cope with the capacity at the time. Now, that isn't the case for every situation, I fully acknowledge, and there will be some situations where there are issues that we need to resolve, and those where properties have been previously flooded will always be the priority. Discussions are ongoing with Highways colleagues at the moment, other organisations, to look at how these things can be taken forward. So we don't always have to wait for the outcome of the Section 19 investigation to take that forward if we're aware of what the issues might be, and some of those discussions have already been ongoing. I hope that's helpful for now, but if there are any further questions, happy to take them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for the clarification on that. I don't see any further questions being alluded to at the moment. So the second part of your question, Councillor Baxter, is about the misfortunate flooding that also happened in Spalding and the 37 properties that were affected there. I did actually visit the Spalding area literally the day after the flash flooding happened, and indeed the colossal rainfall that occurred there. One of my main reasons for wanting to make sure that the agencies are more connected in their responses is that none of us can, particularly at this level, do anything to actually sort out the climate change implications. What we have to do, and what we are here to do, is to actually manage the situations when they misfortunately occur. And in doing that, that is why I'm so eager that the Memorandum of Understanding and the connected agencies and the way in which we're able to help people with these misfortunate situations need, and I know that we've got extra pumping resilience in 4 particular locations. Given my chance, I would hope we could move it to being 6, because the response to get one of those to the affected area is quite difficult. So where we actually are is that we're wanting to not just look at the situations that occur that get reported from Section 19s and the way forward. We will be moving forward to recommendations shortly, which I'd like to also include some criteria to do with near misses as well. However, I'm sort of broadening the conversation rather than addressing that of Spalding, albeit I fully understand it. Indeed, the same situation happened in Thirlby, as you remember, December 2019 as well, and has been debated this morning. is the fact that these situations have happened across many members' divisions, and indeed they will continue to happen. It's how much more efficiently we can look after these situations. That's what's dearest to my heart. However, if I could call back Matthew, please, if you'd like to expand on the Spalding situation, I'd be most grateful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So, as you'll see from the report, the Spalding area probably really did bear the brunt of some of those storms with the rainfall totals experienced. So, for example, Fosdyke, there was a report of 187 millimetres over that storm event, which really is quite something. And for example, Surfleet recorded 136 millimetres, 110 millimetres of which fell in just 4 hours. So, many of the reports that we received were, again, just to reiterate my point, just a deluge of rainfall in such a short space of time, the systems couldn't cope with it. It isn't necessarily that the systems weren't working, they just couldn't cope with the volume of water that was coming down in such a short space of time. Again, I would caveat with the fact that I'm not saying that is the case in all instances, but that certainly was a common theme that ran through what we experienced. Regarding Spalding, in the sense of any solutions, there are already some works that are being progressed with the internal drainage boards in collaboration around the town, and also there is some discussions that are taking place with highways colleagues and other organisations as well around some of the areas that were particularly badly hit in Spalding for what solutions might look like in the future. As is often the case, it doesn't always just fall to a single authority to bring resolution to these problems. And for example, in some of the areas of Spalding, in the initial discussions I've been involved with, involve perhaps ourselves as the county council, internal drainage boards, it might involve water companies, and in some cases it actually involves riparian landowners as well, so private individuals. So it would only be in combination of these things coming together that it would actually bring any real benefit. It isn't just something in isolation often. So that's just something that we need to bear in mind. And those discussions do happen and are happening in certain areas. And Spalding, I've got a meeting scheduled in the next week to discuss some further things around the Spalding area and how we might take that forward on a wider scale, not just the localised issues where we've experienced the problems. So hopefully that's helpful in explaining that.
Are we okay with that, Councillor Baxter? Thank you very much. Okay, with no further indications to speak, then we have a proposal which I think perhaps, as I've alluded to, we need to perhaps expand on. So I move that we receive and note this report and further updates provided on particular sites as have been raised today. I think this needs to be done, and I think we need to record that we would like the action outcomes of Section 19 investigations to be timely and able to be reported. That the memorandum of understanding that across the agencies and indeed the districts is completed, that the situation of that there's work done on the near misses that we're experiencing, because I actually believe in what we have been discussing this morning, that we need a criteria of definition on near misses, because they're not just hearsay about when it gets to a Section 19, we know it's an official situation that's investigated. We know that there's a trigger point, and the one at Thurlby didn't quite make it in 2019, but it was a real live issue that needed addressing. So I think we need some criteria, if I could ask Cara, that is noted for definition for the next meeting, please. Having added those, yes, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. Something that's just occurring to me. You're talking about the Section 19 investigations and when they're open and when they're reported. I think it would be a good idea for the local member to be kept appraised of what's happening with these Section 19s. Sometimes a Section 19's opened and you're not aware of it. You end up at a parish council meeting a couple of months down the line and suddenly they're on about a flooding event which you're not aware of. So I've just wondered if we could put in there somewhere local members being kept informed of a Section 19 occurrence, and indeed, you know, what's happening going forward with those Section 19s. It's okay them coming to this committee and we get an opportunity to see the report where things have happened, but I think the local member wants bearing in mind all along with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Very poignant and accurate to say so. So where we've got to adding to the report about the outcomes of Section 19 notifications, we want to add that the local ward member is informed as well. I think that would include that. Yes.
Bear with me, Chair. I must say that whenever I've made inquiries to the flood team, that I've had the utmost cooperation from them and feedback and help from them. So I would like to say thank you for that. It's just that in these occurrences where you're not aware of a flooding incident or problems after with the investigation, that you are kept updated automatically. A lot of the time you're made aware right from the start because people contact you. But I must say any interactions I've had with the flood team, they've been really good coming forward with information and action as well. Thank you.
Yes, I fully sympathise. It's a joined up, connected approach that we all sometimes don't always feel without sort of trying to hold it together. We actually get a conclusion from. Okay, Councillor Bunny.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering whether we need to be asking for, this might go under here or later on, some form of workshop or something along the problems of surface flooding or the potential surface flooding in this county, because I do believe that we can spend a lot of time on fluvial flooding, coastal flooding, which are important, but this surface flooding is there, and as Councillor Fleetwood mentioned, if pumping stations went down, the problem could be a lot worse, and I think we perhaps need to know what's available and what we can do about it and what we can learn together as a county.
Thank you very much. Unless I see any consent, then I would suggest we put that on the forward programme and that we put it on sooner rather than later. I think we could get it on to probably February, could we not? Okay, thank you very much. So if I could ask now Kyra to make a précis of the proposal, that the amendments that we have decided that have been raised today, please.
Thank you very much indeed. So we move that the committee receives and notes this report and further updates provided on particular sites as these were raised today. And in addition, the committee moves that action outcomes on Section 19 investigations are timely reported. Number 2, that the memorandum of understanding is completed. And number 3, that work done on near misses and a further criterion definition for near misses is provided. And number 4, that local ward members are kept up to date with process of works being undertaken. And number 5, that this future report is also added on the work programme. Thank you.
Okay, on the premise of that, can I make the proposal with those amendments then? Is everybody in agreement where we are, please? Okay, I think that's unanimous, but just in case for clarity, does anyone dissent from that? No, that's lovely. Thank you. That's agreed then. Thank you very much indeed. Right, turning next, if we may, to the Environment Agency update. It's very good to welcome Morgan Ray here today. I'm looking forward to updates on capital schemes and management updates, and indeed perhaps he'll probably be saying a few words about perhaps the support that we need to show towards riparian right endorsement as well. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, you've asked me to come with a position statement today around abstraction licences on the Witham catchment and also how we respond to environmental incidents. I have provided a paper with regards, as you say, a normal paper on capital schemes, instant response and maintenance. I'll take that largely as read unless there's any questions on that. I would just like to add as well, further to the initial discussions we had earlier on FloodX, just to clarify that that was a week-long event. I know many members observed on Friday, but it's actually a week-long event starting on the Monday, building up to the first initial forecasts through to the eventual recovery stages that you observed on the Friday. So yeah, it was a lots of officers from the Environment Agency were involved, and it was a really good chance to test our procedures and for a good bit of training and feedback. So I'll go on to the abstraction licensing. So the Witham abstraction license strategy was published on the 17th December 2020, and I refer councillors to that document. It's available online, and I'll happily provide the link to that afterwards. So the strategy sets out how we manage new and existing abstraction and impoundment within the Witham catchment in the Anglian River Basin District. It ensures that we meet river basin management plan objectives for water resources, avoids the deterioration within this catchment, provide water for abstraction and to protect the environment. We apply a consistent approach to the water body in which the abstraction is located, and also all downstream surface water bodies that may be affected by reduction in abstraction related flow, and adjacent groundwater bodies affected by any reduction in groundwater. The strategy sets out local approaches to sustainable management of water resources. This is in collaboration with partners. So since autumn 2018, for example, the South 40-foot catchment was selected as a priority catchment within the DEFRA water abstraction plan. A brief overview of the catchment. The catchment exterior extends across a large part of central and southern Lincolnshire. The catchment covers an area of approximately 3,261 kilometres squared. The majority of the catchment is rural with good agricultural land. So the water resources, the Lincolnshire limestone is the main aquifer within the strategy area. It helps meet the demand for both public water supply and to a lesser extent agriculture. The Spilsby sandstone aquifer also supports public water supplies. Only a small proportion of this aquifer falls within the catchment though. But this outcrop is important because it provides the main recharge opportunity for the aquifer. There are also some locally important secondary aquifers within the catchment, such as the Bain sands and gravels. So the major, as you know, the major river within the catchment is the River Witham, and the largest surface water abstraction licence is the short ferry part of the Trent Witham Ancombe scheme. This enables the transfer of water into the neighbouring Ancombe catchment. This meets the demands for public water supply and industrial uses. Other significant abstraction licence are for public water supply. These are primarily from the confined Lincolnshire limestone aquifer. There are also numerous licences for spray irrigation, reflecting the importance of agriculture within the area. So there's around about 50 million metres cubed of water abstracted a year. That's based on the 2013 to 18 average. There's around 567 licensed abstractions. 90 licences have hands-off flow, so that's where restrictions come into place when there's a certain flow, and that's from the flows at 20 gauging stations. I'll just say a little bit about the proportion of what the abstraction's used for. So around about 49% is used for public water supply and other potable uses, Around about 17% is agriculture, around about 9% is industry, and 25% for amenity and environmental use. It's important to note that climate change will impact on the quantity and seasonal availability of water resources within the catchment. So the projected climate change impacts are for rainfall to decrease by 39% in the summer, as we've seen recently, but increase by 35% in the winter. Low flows to be 81% lower, but peak flows to be 35% higher. So quite a few impacts from climate change expected. The surface water availability is calculated at a number of assessment points. There's 14 assessment points within the Witham strategy area. The water resource availability is calculated at 4 different flows. So Q30, Q50, Q70 and Q95. So explain a little bit about what that is. So the Q30 is the flow of a river which is exceeded on average 30% of the time. So Q50, the flow would be exceeded 50% of the time, and so on. And then we assess for all those different 14 points the availability of water at those different flow rates. So as you can imagine, so Q95 is very, very sort of low water levels, and there'd be no availability at that rate, through to Q30 where there is some availability, but it will be all assessed on a case-by-case basis. The groundwater availability, so this is water which just comes out the catchment, so there's no water availability for new consumptive abstraction in the Lincolnshire limestone, the Lincolnshire chalk and Spilsby sandstone. There may be water available for consumptive abstraction in the Bain sands and gravels, but obviously that would be taken on a case-by-case basis. It's important to note that surface water can be fed by groundwater, so springs feed the headwaters or contribute further downstream. If groundwater abstraction lowers the water table, this could result in these spring flows or river base flows reducing or ceasing altogether. Surface waters will then be affected in terms of flows, volumes and ecology. So when people apply for a licence, we ask them to consider the reliability of that surface water abstraction. By assessing the quantity of water available at different flows, it's possible to see when there is a surplus or deficit of water, the associated reliability of an abstraction. This is an indication only. Actual reliability of a licence will then be discussed when applicants apply. We may have to add constraints to licences, such as hands-off flows. So that's where, as I said, sort of flows when conditions to protect the environment and the rights of other abstractors. As a result, when we grant a licence, it doesn't mean that we guarantee a supply of water. These conditions specify that if the flow in the river or groundwater level drops below what is needed to protect the environment, abstraction must reduce or stop. In dry years, restrictions are likely to apply more often. There's no guarantee that we will grant a licence even where water is available for abstraction. This is because we have to determine each application on its own merits. Local factors may mean we're either unable to grant a licence as applied for or even at all. New licences within a catchment are usually given a common end date. This allows them to be reviewed at the same time. The next common end date for this strategy area is the 31st of March 2028, and the subsequent one, 31st of March 2040. We will consult the relevant IDBs for any licence that is considered within an IDB area, and in most cases, licences for abstraction within an IDB area require a hands-off level. We talked about hands-off flows earlier, but they require a hands-off level condition relevant to the local management system. This is agreed following liaison with the relevant IDBs. As I said, I'll provide the link to the strategy, which sort of gives a little bit more information, and you can actually sort of see on there the maps of different areas and the availability in those different areas under the different flows. But happy to take any questions on abstraction.
Thank you very much, Morgan. I think in particular the extraction usage is very interesting of what areas that virtually 50% is for public and the other uses that come out of it. I think also you mentioned about the input from the internal drainage boards, and indeed the level at which licence are given to them to or considered for water extraction, and that in this particular drought, very dry year, there is a balancing act between the level at which extraction is made, or in fact whether that extraction criteria is lowered, because the balancing act of that, of course, is the cost of energy as well, and how the overall impact of the internal drainage board budgets actually then affect on the general fund of district councils as well. So it's a very fine line balance thing to deal with, particularly with the climate change difficulties that we have. I'd like to invite any members of the committee to comment. Do we have any that? Right, yes. Councillor Fleetwood, Councillor Austin after that.
Maybe a bit too technical, this one, I don't know. The Ancombe water transfer, I'm very familiar with it at Short Ferry, obviously in an area I represent. But I'm just curious where the water comes out in the Ancombe or vice versa. It can obviously go from the Witham to the Ancombe, but can it also be reversed and the water come from the Ancombe to the Witham? What is the pumping location on the Ancombe, please?
The water from the Trent comes from Torksey, near Torksey Lock, and I don't believe the process is reversible, but I'll have to double check on that. I don't believe there's a pumping station at the Ancombe end.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Austin?
Strange question. Am I the only one who's not had some information about this? Was it sent to us, all this data and so on? I've just got a nasty feeling it would have been sent to me as a borough councillor, and when I was preparing for this meeting, I was using ModGov and not thinking to look back to my Boston Borough system. I was just working, at it as a county councillor. Have I missed something? As I would, if I haven't, could we be sent a lot of all this data that you've been telling us? Thank you.
Morgan, thank you.
Excuse me. Yeah, it was a late request for the position statement on these two items. So I'm happy to provide that information afterwards. Although, as I said, it was everything's in the Witham abstraction license strategy. So happy to send that link, and all this information I've just given is basically a summary of what's in that strategy. So it's all there, and it goes into further detail as well.
Thank you for that. I understand, Vice Chairman, you'd like to come in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I appreciate you won't be able to comment on individual applications and such like in this committee, but the basis of my question comes from an application we had before the Planning and Regulation Committee earlier in the month, and I'd just like to know how long a abstraction application is likely to take to progress from application to either a yes or no answer.
There are statutory deadlines. I'm not sure what those are at the moment, but I can find those out for you.
Okay. Right. So I don't see anybody else wishing to contribute. So I'd like to move a proposal that we receive the updated offers from the Environment Agency and note the progress of works undertaken by Lincolnshire. Can I ask for members' support on that, please, by a show of hands? Yep, seems as we're unanimous on that. For the avoidance of doubt, is there anybody wishing to be recorded for dissenting? No, thank you. We'll consider that carried. Thank you. Right, I understand that we've got Pete Riley ready to come into the meeting on the difficulties with the Boston situation with weed and dead, well, to put no finer point on it, dead fish and the situation. I must say I'm very welcome that we're going to get this update. It was a question that was raised at full council. It's something that was handed on to me from the Public Protection and Communities Scrutiny, and indeed we've been busy sort of chasing to get a conversation and a position statement today, so I'm very welcome that he's here. So if we can include you now, thank you, that'd be really lovely. Welcome to see you, Peter. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, good morning, everybody. So I have written up and sent the briefing note. I'll just take you through it. It is an ongoing situation. We've had this for a number of years, as you're probably aware. We expect to have it in the future. And while the situation is drawn to a close for this year, in terms of the weed has now disappeared, as happens with the colder, darker weather, we are planning for future years when we expect a repeat occurrence. So the briefing note I've sent just indicates this is the second consecutive year there have been particularly large problems with the floating weed at Boston. There are other locations in the catchment as well, but I know that's
just a moment,
particular.
please, Peter. Yes, Councillor Braxton.
The gentleman has mentioned a briefing note. Have we got the briefing note?
Yes, thank you. A briefing note was shared with us this morning, just before the meeting. It will be circulated afterwards.
Okay. So could I ask the gentleman before he continues, do we need to have the briefing note in front of us in order to understand what he's telling us?
I don't believe so. It's a single side of A4, and I will go through it in a degree of detail.
Okay, let's proceed on that basis then. I agree with Councillor Baxter. If we could have had the briefing note before, it would have been very helpful. But
yeah, my apologies for that.
In all earnest and in urgency, Councillor Baxter, as I've opened this particular debate, is that this is a ongoing pressing issue that's been going on for several months, and in fact if we listen to Councillor Skinner, it's a situation that's been going on for much longer than that without going into the debate. So I actually welcome what this report is going to bring, and I think at the end of it we need to decide on an action as to where we go from here, including the briefing note. Thank you. So back to you, please.
Thank you. So the particular issue at the moment is two types of weed, a zolla and a duckweed, and they're both tiny particle plants that are traditional weed boats used by the Environment Agency, by the Canal Rivers Trust, and by IDBs that don't cope with very well. They can't remove that weed. The weed grows at a terrific rate, eventually creating a mat of material, sometimes 100 or 150 millimetres thick, which clearly blocks out all light on the watercourse when it gets carried by the flow downstream, and eventually leads to the death of everything underneath it, plants, fish and eels. It also creates problems for boaters and other water users, and looks and smells unpleasant. As I said, it starts most often in July or so. Colder weather does kill it off, so there is no weed on the river at the moment, but it is an annual problem. Now, ideally, rainfall and flow on the river causes the control gates at the bottom end to open and allow the weed to flow out to sea. But low flows, like we've experienced again this summer, don't allow this. So it remains trapped on an Environment Agency debris boom at the bottom end of the watercourse. And that boom is a safety feature, protecting the control structures at the bottom from floating debris. So removal of that boom is not an option. Manual operation of the gates can allow the weed to pass. However, there is, of course, unavoidable loss of large volumes of water if that activity is undertaken. The lead organisation on this at the moment is the Canal and Rivers Trust. So they're the navigation authority on the watercourse, and they have a statutory duty to maintain the waterway, and in this case particularly the water level. The Environment Agency maintain the river from a flood risk management perspective, but as has been mentioned in the previous item by Morgan, obviously we also pay to pump water into the Witham in the Trent, Witham and Combe scheme. So we have the issue of paying to put water in at the top end of the watercourse, with a request to allow this weed out at the bottom, which of course allows that water out. So you can understand we're in a difficult position around allowing that, particularly where we might have restrictions on abstraction on upstream water users. And then to be seen to have been allowing water out at the bottom end to clear this weed clearly is a difficulty for us. The agency are not funded to remove this weed for any reason other than flood risk reduction, and this weed presents no flood risk. So our funding streams are discrete and we cannot cross those streams. So difficult position there. Over time, however, again from an Environment Agency perspective, this has and it's foreseeable that it will again lead to an environmental incident. We have 4 categories of environmental incident, and if it falls into either a Cat 1 or Cat 2, the Environment Agency will attend. Now that action also remains unfunded, but we have to attend in that scenario. So that leaves us in the position we find ourselves at the moment, where we can watch an impending environmental incident develop. We're unable to do anything about it until fish or eels are killed, and then we are compelled to respond. And as I put in the paper there, we have to find a way out of that situation. It makes no sense to sit on our hands, unable to act until there is a fish kill or an eel kill. Affected parties include the Canal and Rivers Trust, Environment Agency, Boston Rowing Club, Boston Borough Council. It's particular impact on local business owners, and of course the general public, because the smell and the impact on tourism and enjoyment of the watercourse down there. First meeting did take place some weeks ago, but unfortunately I was unable to attend myself through ill health. So I couldn't attend that meeting. There is a follow-up meeting planned for 8 days' time, so a week from tomorrow. We will have the follow-up meeting, again, being chaired and organised by the Canal and Rivers Trust. I'll be attending on behalf of the Environment Agency, and there are other attendees as well. There is no simple solution to this. There's no one organisation who can or ought to be taking any action. So it's likely to be a range of solutions. The Environment Agency elsewhere in the country are trialling different weed boats that might help with this, but it's likely that there will need to be input by a range of partners, those organisations that I've mentioned, to allow us to manage this issue. Personally, internally to the Environment Agency, we have this issue that we have to resolve the funding streams, but not waiting for an environmental incident before we can intervene. But it does provide considerable difficulty for us at the moment. As I said, for this year, this issue is behind us. We do anticipate it again next June, July time, perhaps a little later in the year. That may not happen if we have a cool, wet year, if we have plenty of flow on the river, but it will happen again. We do anticipate it happening again in future years. So the group that's coming together, the plan is to work up a solution or a range of solutions across those organisations that we can manage the situation going forward for all future years. As I said, in certain years it may not occur, but as Morgan alluded to there, with the change in the climate and the expected changes on rainfall, summer and winter, we can expect it again. So we do need to be in a place where we can manage it and be on the front foot in future years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much for the report. I can see that Councillor Austin is indicating to speak. But before actually doing so, we're back to another situation, aren't we, members? And the basic question that is put to us is, how can we get this resolved? Now, in the journey of making to this presentation, we have had some dialogue between the Chief Executive, indeed Andy Gutherson, and with Norman Robinson, the Chief Executive. The situation seems to be that, as it is mentioned to us, that where the navigation is concerned, that is a responsibility of the Canal and Rivers Trust. The environment, yes, we understand the water's trapped, and that owing to climate change there's an issue there, but we come back to the one word, isn't it? It's how. And the residents of Boston, in particular, are subjected to the most awful situation of smell, amongst other things. And the one thing that we really need to ask at the meeting that you have next, to be fair, Peter, is that some way forward is sought by way of agreement that we can actually deal with the situation, the fundamental situation of which the main complaint is. And if I was a resident in Boston, I'd feel equally the same. I don't need to be a resident in Boston because I feel it anyway. Enough said by me. Over to Councillor Austin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Right. I'm actually very lucky because as far as the bit of Boston that I actually represent is all the tidal bit. So I've got the flood risk, of course, but that's a different sort of situation. Right. My first point is very much, I am concerned, obviously, for the whole situation, but for the reputation of Boston. It's well known in this county, if there's any way that Boston can be knocked, and I'm speaking as a Boston councillor at this point, not as a county councillor, then it will be used. Now, I looked up the data just for interest. The River Witham is 132 kilometres long. That takes us from the source, which is right down, well, pretty well in Rutland, and it drains pretty well a huge amount as it goes up to Grantham, up to Lincoln, and then eventually back to us. And it does not, of course, include the tidal bit, whereas it is known as the Haven. Moreover, so we're draining all that area. We are also, of course, in Boston, in receipt of anything that people in the Midlands, Nottingham, further up in the Midlands, choose to throw down their drains, because it all comes then down, a lot of it, all right, it's supposed to go out down the Trent, but of course it comes down the Fosdyke and eventually into the Witham. So we are draining a huge amount of the country, and this is a major, major river that I think a lot of people outside of Lincolnshire haven't ever heard of. Now, whatever is done is probably going to cost money. Now, we already, in the borough of Boston, every resident in the borough of Boston has to foot drainage, what do I call them? The levies by the IDBs. Yet, no offence to people living in Sleaford, say, in North Kesteven, they don't pay for it, but we have to get rid of their water, you know, and any cost pretty well has got to fall on the people other than the people of Boston.
As a point of information...
I'm going to finish, because, you know, it's going to be, you know, it's not just a case of what's going to happen, how's it going to happen, but if any money involved, it's got to be shared equally amongst all the possible sources of the problem. Thank you. I've made my point this time on behalf of the people of the Borough of Boston. Thank you.
Thank you very much for making that so accurately. I think in all fairness
with due respect, you shouldn't be commenting. It should be the author of the report who comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. When it's a situation quite as emotive as this, then it comes from the heart as well as the head. So please accept that. So if you're looking for a response, then are we going to go back to Peter for that? Thank you very much.
Yeah, and without sort of trying to shirk responsibility or avoid the question, the problem of the weed is not the problem of the water. So drainage charges deal with getting the water away. IDBs deal with that. And as I said, this weed in this particular instance causes no increase in flood risk, so it doesn't impede flow. It just floats on top of the water. It's really an environmental and, as you say, an amenity problem there. I really can't comment on the cost, drainage charges and so on, but certainly I see this as being an environmental issue rather than a drainage issue. It might be rather easy to deal with if we had that access to that funding stream.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I have Vice Chairman that indicated to wish to speak next, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I could just appreciate a little bit of clarity around who is responsible, whether this is an Environment Agency responsibility or a Canals and River Trust responsibility, because just picking up on the point that the Canals and River Trust are responsible for the navigation as the navigation authority and have a statutory duty to maintain the waterway, including the water level. Given the thickness and expanse of the weed as we've seen in Boston over the last couple of summers, does the Canals and River Trust have a responsibility to effectively clear that weed so as to maintain the navigation? Given the thickness of it and the expanse of it, I wouldn't fancy the chances of getting a boat through any of it. I'm also picking up on the Category 1 and Category 2 response thresholds, as I think this feeds in to a broader concern that I have, that the Environment Agency, as I understand it at the moment, is regarding itself as defunded in terms of some categories and some forms of enforcement work. Certainly the possibly Category 2, I don't know if there's a Category 3, to the extent that effectively there isn't the opportunity to intervene until the problem gets worse. And my understanding of this issue is that it comes down to a funding dispute between the Environment Agency and DEFRA, and people at that level playing politics. Insofar as I understand, the Environment Agency has, in requiring further funding from DEFRA, made clear that they would have to cut enforcement. DEFRA having not put the money in, the Environment Agency is now cutting enforcement. This is a particularly sorry state of affairs if the Environment Agency no longer has the ability to get involved at an early stage to stop a problem becoming worse. And I think it's also worth bearing in mind the scale of the problem, the scale of the challenge that we're looking at here, if it's to be tackled by weed boats, is that 100, 150 millimetre of depth across the width of the River Witham for the length of which this problem, we are talking thousands of tonnes of material. And I'm deeply sceptical of whether there are enough weed boats in the country to get that amount of material out of the Witham and on the banks. So I suppose what I'm aiming at is a understanding of whose the responsibility is, an understanding of what we can do to encourage the Environment Agency to take enforcement action at an earlier stage if that's possible or appropriate, and to understand just what those solutions are going to be going forward, because this is a biodiversity catastrophe on the scale of a fertilizer spill. And when you think the death and destruction to wildlife and habitat caused by this incident, if this was a private company that was causing this pollution, then we quite rightly, and every agency, would be coming down on them like a ton of bricks. And because we seem to have regulatory organisations that are involved in this, no one's quite sure, or I certainly don't at this stage, quite sure where the buck actually stops, and where the priority is in making sure that it doesn't happen again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Peter, would you like to come back, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, yes. So there's no dispute between the Canal and Rivers Trust and the Environment Agency. The Canal and Rivers Trust are accountable for the navigation of the watercourse. So that's clearly theirs, and they have indeed had their weed boats and made efforts to keep the weed clear. The Environment Agency's sort of remit here is we remove weed where there is an impact on flood risk, where it increases flood risk by decreasing flow or taking up volume in the channel. That isn't the case here. So that's, as I said, why the Canal and Rivers Trust are leading on it. They are much closer to the issue. It is impacting on them. It's not impacting so much on the Environment Agency until it becomes an environmental incident, until there is a fish kill. So just to clarify on those 4 different categories, they are category 1 is the most serious incident. So you're quite right that the agency used to attend category 3s. I don't believe we ever attended category 4s, which are the most minor, but we used to attend category 3s. And for the funding issues you covered, that's no longer possible. So we now only attend Cat 2 and Cat 1 incidents. What we've had in Boston on more than one occasion in the summer past are category 1 incidents, so the most serious category, which involved either the death of 100 fish or more, and there were many hundreds of fish killed, or eels are a protected species, so even a single eel killed leads to a Cat 1 incident. So we have multiple Cat 1 incidents. And as I said, the difficulty that we find ourselves in at the moment is we are not funded to deal with this issue as it develops. So we watch it develop. We know it's going to turn into an incident, and our hands are tied up to that point, and then it becomes an incident. We need to deal with it. The issue that I'll be leading on for the agency is finding a way of squaring that circle. We cannot. It just can't be right that we sit on our hands watching a situation deteriorate and a fish kill, for instance, develop, and we can't intervene until it has actually happened. To be honest with you, I don't know how we will resolve that issue at the moment. As I said, the funding streams are discrete, and we are not allowed to cross funding streams. So the active intervention that can be done at the gate is done by flood risk management staff. There is no flood risk here, so we cannot justify that expenditure. But as I said, it cannot stand that we allow this situation to develop and deteriorate year on year. I'll be working with Canal and Rivers Trust and others to try and find. Like I said, I think there will be a range of solutions here. There's not one organisation that will step in and fix this. There isn't one solution that will step in and be put in place and fix this. There'll be a range of solutions. But I do have confidence that we will be able to deal with this situation better in the future. I'm not saying that it will be perfect, but I do expect the working group that we've got, that meeting next week again, to come up with a number of solutions, a number of interventions that will allow us to manage the situation better.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand you'd like to come back on that, Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, and incredibly grateful for the response. It's really useful, and to one extent I don't wish for us to effectively to shoot the messenger on this one. I think the broader point, and I appreciate this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's incredibly serious, is that if the Environment Agency is no longer attending to Category 3 incidences, and appreciating there is always a risk that they can get worse rather than better, and it's always better to intervene on any situation such as that sooner rather than later to prevent greater harm further down the line. And again, appreciating that this rests at a much more senior level within DEFRA and the Environment Agency. I don't know whether it would be appropriate, Mr. Chairman, to write from this committee to DEFRA, perhaps at Secretary of State level, pointing out our deep concerns over the inability of the Environment Agency currently to respond to Category 3 events, and having to wait until they get to Category 2 in order to take action. I appreciate this is something that Environment Agency operatives aren't able to pick up in a political arena, but ourselves as councillors can do. I think it would be, I really look forward to hearing the what comes back from the meetings and the stuff that's going to take place over in the, I hope, immediate future between Canals and River Trust, Environment Agency and other partners on how this is prevented in the future. When it comes to reporting back, I did wonder whether it would be worthwhile inviting Canals and Rivers Trust to come and talk to us as part of that exercise. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, fine. Thank you for that. Well, I think first and foremost, we'll be asking, please, for Peter to respond to us and report back to us on the update of the meeting in 8 days' time. And we don't want to be waiting for that update for a considerable length of time. So if we could have an undertaking that you will do that, please, Peter, before proceeding. Thank you very much. And then it would be prudent to ask members whether they would indicate their support for a letter to be written, as has been suggested by Councillor Ashton. I'm going to come to you next, Ashley Morris. Okay, there seems to have general consent. Right, so if I could now call upon who's been patiently waiting, Councillor Ashley Morris, beg your pardon, to be included. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I mean, quite a lot has obviously been covered. I mean, I live at Langrick, which is 6 miles out of Boston, which was absolutely, the river runs not that far from my property, and Langrick Bridge, people will be aware of. It was thick and ridiculous, the situation. That was absolutely lime green as far as you could see. There are businesses down that stretch of the river. There's a small marina, well-ish, in Langrick. There's Chapel Hill Marina. There are all sorts of businesses that rely on the river. And this, it's not my fault, because I only deal with the water and I deal with the fish and I deal with the weed, is ludicrous. I mean, I don't know how it seems to everyone else, but it sounds ridiculous to me. Absolutely ridiculous. Surely these people can get together. I mean, the weed cutting boat looks like a seaside pedalo and tiddles around. I've watched it countless times. I drive down quite a stretch of the Maud Foster going back home, all of which is also green. Absolutely bright green. And to say, well, we can't do anything until it's really bad, I mean, I don't know how that sounds to most people, but it sounds incredible to me. And there's no money, or funding streams are discreet. I mean, could we not use English so that we all know exactly what we're talking about? There's no money to clear the weed. Well, perhaps there's some other way, and certainly I think the Secretary of State is certainly the least of our options. I mean, this is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And it was awful, even down near the Black Sluice, where you can actually see where the various streams go up. That was everywhere, was covered in dead fish and weed, and that's awful for residents. And to echo just a tiny bit what Councillor Austin said, yeah, we do feel we're the sort of, the thin end of the wedge when it comes to things in Boston. We may be wrong, but it's certainly a perception, and a perception for people that we deal with all the time. So, yeah, I'm very much supportive of what Councillor Ashton suggested. I suggest we do that really quickly. That would be terrific. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you for the input. You spoke, as I have demonstrated today, both from the heart and from the mind, as to what the situation is and how difficult it is. I think we should take some advice from Peter Riley, in that from the update that he's going to give us, I think one of the things we need to do is, and we've agreed, and it's members' consent to do so, that we're going to write a letter of support for those in category 3 situations and how they can be addressed. I think also that we need to make sure that a further report is made to us at the next meeting, so as we continue this, because as I open the debate, how is the word, are we going to solve it? Because that's what we need to be working towards, very much so. So if we, I think we've had an undertaking from Peter Riley that he's going to do that, so I don't think I need to bring him back in at that point. Yeah. Hello, Peter. Yep.
Sorry, I didn't speak. I'm happy to speak if you wish me to, but I wasn't trying to interject.
But yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I saw it.
Are we okay with that? Yeah. Okay. Fine. Thank you very much. So I understand there's an indication from Councillor Clark to contribute to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just want to point out that I'm sat here hearing all this about Boston, and I can appreciate it's happening at Boston, but it's also happening the stretch I live at with the River Witham. There's a green, thick, mushy that's all the way along the river. It goes through the town centre, it goes into Brayford, which is part of the major tourist attraction of Lincolnshire. And, you know, I just want to make it clear, it's not just Boston, it's elsewhere this has been affected.
Thank you very much for that input. I think it's also fair to say where the internal drainage boards are concerned, they levy onto all 7 district councils, and indeed, as like everybody else here, as a resident, we all have to contribute towards our taxes. So, whereby I have sympathy for the residue that is collected and does reach Boston towards the mouth of what then happens. And at the moment, we've got a problem with water flow as well. The point is that I do honestly feel that everybody has a tariff that's imposed on them, and district councils aren't really in any position to challenge. So I take that. I think we've probably had enough. Councillor Austin?
Very quick question or comment. It's a long time to the next meeting, so if there's a reasonable statement sometime received between now and the, you know, sort of the midpoint, then can that be circulated to members, please? Thanks.
Yeah.
I think Pete Riley's heard that. I'd like to take an undertaking, as you will be sat in this chair and I shall be at the side of you, and without any road traffic accidents, not late either. If we get a response before the next full council meeting, it might also avoid us having another question about it, and we might be able, if necessary, to give a position statement in the way forward, and I think that would be constructive. Could you undertake that for me, please, Peter?
Happy to do so. I'd expect to be able to get back to you by the end of next week.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we could move on to the next item on our agenda, if we may now. Have we got Jonathan Gluram? Yes, he's with us, is he? Okay, so for the Angling Water update, which enables us to receive an update on the work recently undertaken. I know we've got Jonathan's now with us online, and indeed will be filling us in on responses, probably something on capital investments and indeed some of the issues with declining outcomes that he's been experiencing. So over to you, please, Jonathan, for presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, morning all. Thank you very much. That's right. I'm gonna focus on investment opportunities this morning. So happy as always to take any questions, but I'll run through these slides. There's only kind of 6 slides of content to really go through, and then yeah, happy to take any questions you have. So if you could just move on, please. Oh, and the next one, please. Yeah, so I thought I'd just do a quick recap in terms of our investment, and in particular with a focus on what we do around trying to manage flood risk, what we do around managing and reducing what I've called pollution there, but really, you know, in the water quality of watercourses across Lincolnshire, and also how we manage growth. And we absolutely recognise that I suppose certainly flood risk is becoming more frequent. We've seen that over the summer, the challenges that we've got with that, particularly those kind of large storms. Any type of water quality issues now are completely unacceptable, and we accept that. And absolutely, you know, we need to grow our communities going forward. So just this slide focuses on the investment that we have across the current 5-year investment period, which runs from 2020 to 2025. And as you can see there, we've got some significant investment across Lincolnshire. So more than £243 million investment across the county. And I've listed out there some of the kind of key investment locations. The top one, our strategic water resources pipeline, you'll be aware of, takes the lion's share of that investment. But the rest of those locations listed there, which are all investments over £3.5 million, are all on water quality and water framework directive drivers. So really focused on improving the water quality of watercourses across Lincolnshire. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, as part of our, I suppose, commitment to improve water quality across our region, we have formed and created what's called Get River Positive. So, we understand that kind of rivers are the kind of lifeblood of both communities, but also what we do as an organisation. So it's absolutely essential that we look after them as best we can. So we joined forces with Severn Trent Water, who also cover parts of Lincolnshire too. And we have this pledge to get river positive by 2030. So ultimately that means, and you can see our kind of 5 commitments down the right-hand side, and these slides will be shared afterwards. But ultimately this means that we will strive to do no harm to our rivers through our storm overflows and our water recycling centres or sewage treatment works, and do everything that we can to make sure that those watercourses thrive. So and there's lots of different ways that we can do that. So and next slide, please. And I should say that obviously Get River Positive is not necessarily a kind of standalone thing that we've just sort of commenced. We already had plans for investing almost £1 billion in the environment over the current 5-year investment period. So there's over 800 million quid that we will be spending on our what's called our Water Industry Natural Environment Programme. It's also known as the WINEP. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. It is the largest programme of any water company in the country. And you can see in the middle box there the kind of focus of some of the things that that we're doing. So so that includes kind of new storm tanks, which ensure that we don't spill to watercourses when we have heavy rainfall, increasing capacity at our water recycling centres, targeting our investment to reduce the number of spills and monitor those spills, improving bathing water qualities, and also doing as much as possible in terms of sustainable drainage and surface water management measures. So already we had a huge amount in the pipeline, and I listed earlier that a number of those investments across Lincolnshire, and then on top of that we now have this kind of Get River Positive pledge to do even more. So lots and lots going on, lots of positive stuff there. Now, if you can have the next slide, please. We are just commencing, or not just commencing, but we've been working hard over the last number of months on our next, or developing our business plans for the next 5-year investment period. So that is looking forward to between 2025 and 2030, and we are looking at both WINEP and what's called PR24. So that's the 2024 price review, which is Ofwat making an assessment on what it is that we can do with customers' bills. So if I can have the next slide, please. I'll focus on WINEP first. Oh, that's jumped forward a bit. There we go. One more, please. Yeah, there we go. That's better. Oh, yeah, that one, perfect. So as I mentioned, we've got the largest AMP7, so that's the current 5-year period plan of any water company, and we want to build on that for the next 5 years. So, and the key change, or the key difference that we want to build on is our approach to how we actually deliver these kind of water quality improvements. So, and we want to do as much as possible in partnership wherever we can. So we have some really good history of working in partnership alongside others, and in particular on the flood risk side of things, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But the work that ourselves do alongside Matthew's team and your highways teams has been excellent, and is often seen as the way to do things kind of nationally. So we want to build on that and see whether we can do something similar when we look at how we manage water quality issues. Now, in particular, we're interested in this kind of small yellow box on the left. We're particularly interested in exploring opportunities to work in partnership in those catchments. Now, and I just want to focus on Louth in particular, because Louth is one of the catchments where we want to have a real focus on surface water management as a kind of solution to both water quality issues, but other issues as well. And the reason I say that is because Louth has a fairly combined sewer network. So the sewer system there takes both foul water and surface water in the same pipes. And obviously, when that happens, that can lead to storm overflows to watercourses. So now we have, as you all know, there's sort of obviously a history of flooding across Louth as well, and there's significant growth planned for Louth. And obviously, if we can remove as much of that surface water from that combined system as possible, we can deliver multiple benefits that reduce the number of spills we might have to watercourses, reduce the number of flooding incidents, and obviously create capacity for that future growth. So we've chosen a number of catchments across the region where we want to take this really dedicated surface water management approach, and Louth is one of those catchments. Now, for us to be successful in that, though, we realise that we can't do that in isolation. We can't do that by ourselves, and we will need to work in partnership with other organisations, including yourselves. So obviously, I'll pick this up with Matthew's team separately, and we'll go into a lot more detail. But I just wanted to flag it here that there's obviously an opportunity to do some really significant work across Louth over the next kind of 5-year investment period, which could really make a big difference to the town. So, and if I can have the next slide, please. So that's the WINEP, so the Water Industry Natural Environment Programme. Now, so our investment planning is sort of done slightly separately. So WINEP comes first, and we have to get our submissions into the Environment Agency this week on Wednesday, which is unfortunately the reason I can't be with you today, because I've got to focus on that deadline at the moment. So the other thing that we're focusing on at the moment is PR24, so 2024 price review. So that's where we put a submission to Ofwat. Now, WINEP forms part of PR24, but is developed slightly separately. But within PR24, we want to again look at the opportunities for I suppose co-investment in terms of managing flood risk, and this is where we've been really successful with yourselves, both the flood team and the highways team in the past, and we've spoken in this committee about a number of the things that we've done collaboratively, places like Altham Terrace, which we spoke about at the last meeting, for example, where we have co-funded to the benefit of the community. So, and we want to try and build on that and see what we can do going forward in the next investment period. So again, I've highlighted some of the key locations where there are opportunities to sort of co-fund and co-invest, but equally we're interested in exploring partnership opportunities, across the county. And if I can just pick up on the near misses conversation that was being held earlier, you collectively as part of the county, you'll know of you'll call them near misses. We might call them external floodings. So we record both internal floodings and external floodings and floodings of the highway, and we count them separately. All of that data is already shared with the county, so you guys have all that information. But where you guys might call it a near miss, we might call it a highway flooding or an external flooding. So there are clearly opportunities there for us to, again, to kind of co-fund and co-invest where there are those near misses, as well as where there are those internal floodings. So I think, again, I'll speak with Matthew separately in due course, but we'll be looking at where there are opportunities to do this kind of co-funding and co-investment to the benefit of communities across Lincolnshire. And so my last slide, please. So just to kind of finalise, so on the left there, kind of the bits that we've been doing. So we had a kick-off workshop back in September, and we've now mapped all the different investment opportunities across our region. And my next task is to come out and have a chat with Matthew and his team about looking at where those kind of investment opportunities align with your own, and look at where there might be those opportunities to put things into our business plan. So so I hope to do that over the next week or two. And obviously we want to link all those discussions up with the two things I just talked about and the drainage and wastewater management plan. So obviously I think you guys fed into the consultation on the drainage and wastewater management plan, which is our kind of long-term planning for in kind of your world, that kind of flood risk and water quality piece. So, and all of the investment that we're doing sits under that umbrella of the drainage and wastewater management plan. So what is it that we need from you? Well, ultimately it's your ideas of where there might be those opportunities to kind of co-invest and work together, much like we've done in the past. So that can obviously come from officers, but obviously if there are any members who are aware of issues or opportunities where we can work together, then please get in touch, either with Matthew or directly with myself, and my contact details are all there. So and then finally, just my last bullet point though, although there's a big focus at the moment on this kind of investment planning, we can't take our eye off the ball of what we're doing at the moment. And I think we've still got kind of work planned with yourselves over the next couple of years, next couple of financial years up until March 2025. So we just need to make sure that we continue to deliver that, but also see what we can do going forward. So Chairman, I'll leave it there for now. Very, very happy to take any questions, and yeah, any feedback from members would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Certainly makes for a good platform towards the workshop that we've proposing to have, and I do urge members to get in touch as asked. Now, I understand Councillor Andrew Haig is wishing to speak, so over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman. Jonathan, I've got 3 questions for you, if I may. The first one, you spoke earlier on storm overflows and combined sewers. I'd like to know how many storm overflows Anglian Water has stopped in the last 5 years in Lincolnshire, and how many and the length of combined sewers that they have changed into foul and surface water. So those are the 2 questions. My final question relates to the proposed reservoir at Scredington, and all I've heard from Anglian Water is it's Anglian Water's preferred site. Now, is that purely down to financial constraints for Anglian Water? Now, in the late 70s, 80s, what was then the National Rivers Authority, when parts of Lincoln used to get flooded, the EA today negotiated with landowners to have flood fields that were allowed to flood. And I just wonder why, or if Anglian Water has considered citing the proposed reservoir in that area, because that would seem to me to be A, cheaper, and B, that it would fulfil 2 criteria of providing water and also helping to prevent flooding in Lincoln. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Jonathan, back to you. I knew we wouldn't get through today's debate without some reference to the proposed new reservoir. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'll do my best. So in terms of CSOs removed over the last 5 years, I will have to get back to you on that. I don't have those figures in front of me. I do know that we've removed over 300 CSOs from our network, but how many of those across Lincolnshire, I'll have to come back to you. What I will say though is obviously where we have removed those CSOs from our network, it's, you know, that work is complicated because obviously you can't just do that in isolation. You can't just block up a CSO, because obviously if you block up a CSO, you end up flooding properties, and that's the whole reason they're there in the first place. They are there as kind of, I suppose, flood relief valves, or sort of plug holes, or however you want to sort of define them or think about them. That, you know, they are there to stop people and businesses and communities from flooding. So any work that we do to remove those CSOs has to be done in conjunction with any kind of flood risk management work at the same time. Now, Jeremy, you mentioned, my presentation being a good first step for the workshop that you want to hold on surface water. I completely agree. We can't take any of this stuff in isolation. A lot of the time, it might be, say, highway runoff and runoff from people's properties that's finding its way into those combined systems. So, what are we going to do with that runoff if we just block up these CSOs? We've got to find somewhere else to put and manage and store that water. So, and all of these things are completely linked, and we're absolutely not the only player in this. Both yourselves as the county council, district councils, and even the communities, homeowners have all got a role to play. So, yeah, lots to go out there, but yeah, I think there's a big opportunity to think about how we do things differently, and that's where I think our investment is going in the future. In terms of separating systems, again, I have to come back to you. That will be linked to the kind of CSO opportunity. Actually, putting in completely separate systems where there was once a combined system is a hugely expensive and hugely disruptive exercise, because you basically got to replumb a town or a city to enable yourself to do that. Every single home has to have a connection into those new surface water pipes and so forth, and you can imagine the time and the effort and the disruption that would cause to people. So just to do that on one street, let alone to do it on a kind of a town or a city kind of wide sort of basis. So yeah, I'll get back to you on both of those. I'm sure we'll be able to kind of get some data on that. But yeah, I think really interesting points, and definitely feed into the workshop that you want to do. In terms of the reservoirs, this is obviously being picked up by our water resources team and our dedicated reservoirs team. So I'm no expert. What I will say is I do know that in terms of preferred site, the reason that site has been identified as a preferred site is because we went through a rigorous process of assessing, I think originally 100, maybe over 100 potential sites. That got whittled down to maybe a dozen or so sites across Lincolnshire, and then obviously the preferred site that's been put out to consultation. A whole range of different kind of factors and drivers were built into that process as we identified which site would be preferred. So one of those drivers was flood risk. Obviously, disruption to landowners was obviously in there. The opportunities around managing flooding and all that kind of stuff was all linked in there. So a huge amount of work has gone into that, including a lot of work with the South Links Water Partnership, for example, and other stakeholders who have kind of fed into that process. In terms of your question about kind of areas that have flooded in the past, I suspect one of the reasons we haven't looked at something like that is because in all likelihood our reservoir will have to be raised, so you're almost in a way disconnecting it from the floodplain, and water will have to be pumped in there. The reason for that is because the amount of water that we need to store to meet the demands going into the future. So, and not least some of those demands are some of the things that Morgan spoke about earlier around needing to make sure there is water for the environment and for amenity and sort of biodiversity purposes. So yes, it's all the detail can be delivered by our kind of team who have been doing that. And I think, Chairman, we talked about bringing that team to one of our future meetings to obviously go into a bit more detail. So I think we wanted to get the consultation out of the way first, and then get them back when they can kind of reflect on that consultation. So, but if you do have any specific questions, I'm happy to share the link to the consultations, and you'll be able to get in touch with the team directly through that if need be.
Okay, are we there? Do you want to come back, Andrew?
I'd like to come back and briefly ask if Jonathan can find out whether the reservoir site, one of the considerations was closer to the Witham and west of Lincoln. Thank you.
Back to you then, Jonathan.
I'll check that. I'll send that query to our team and see what they can come back with. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Having the experience of living in Rutland before Rutland had Rutland Water there, I think one of the most important things in the delivery of wherever a new reservoir is that the consultation journey is complete with all partners in particular. One of the biggest upsets with residents in Rutland was the fact that the reservoir wasn't actually for the water for themselves, and in fact their charging authority was Severn Trent, not Anglian at the time. So it comes back to demonstrating the necessary of consultation and making sure things are fully understood. Now, I understand that Councillor Bunny would like to say something next to Jonathan, am I correct?
Yes, please. Just a very quick one. It's more operational on a much more local scale, really. I've been conscious that Anglian Water have been called out by some residents because they've seen sewage in their flooding. And Anglian Water come out and deal with it once or twice, and then they say, oh no, it's actually not our problem, it's the county council problem, or it's highways problem to the householders. And I'm just seeking reassurance that when an operational guy on the street says that, is that then actually passed back, or is that just part of a general conversation? Because to me, it comes across usually as just as, oh, well, it's not actually our responsibility, you need to appoint highways, but they don't see it that way.
Okay, fine. I'll invite Jonathan to come back. There are times in those situations, you also bring the Environment Agency into it as well. So I do sympathise and understand. I've got one on Willoughby Road in Bourne as well. Jonathan, please.
Yeah, sure. So that should be fed back, absolutely. It shouldn't just be a conversation that's held on the street and then no feedback provided. Without knowing the specifics, it's difficult to go into any detail, but you're right, there's often a whole range of different partners involved, particularly where there is surface water flooding. Surface water flooding can often then find its way into the sewer network. That can either cause it to overload. Clearly, if there's any issues that we need to deal with, whether there's a blockage or pump failures, etc., then we'll look at that. And obviously, if it's purely down to hydraulic overload of the sewer, we'll look at that as well. But certainly going forward, as I mentioned in my slide deck, the way we want to try and address that is by working collaboratively with others. I think I can't see Matthew at the moment, but hopefully he's nodding in that I think we have an excellent relationship with Lincolnshire. The way that we work together, my colleague who kind of leads a lot of our flood partnership work used to be in our operational team across Lincolnshire as well. So I think that really helps in terms of the relationship that we have with yourselves. And yeah, I think going forward in the future, we ought to be looking at ways that we can address these things as best we can. Those specific operational issues, I will just take that back and provide a bit of feedback to the local managers to make sure that, wherever those conversations are happening, that is fed back to their contacts, whether it be in highways or in the flood team, because, those teams already do talk to each other. So I will flag that as a concern of yours, Councillor, but that should be happening already.
Thank you. Matthew's interested to comment, I think, probably in support. Thank you.
Thank you for that opportunity, Chairman. I just wish to support what Jonathan was saying and hopefully give some reassurance to members in the room that yes, we are having those discussions with Anglian Water, particularly around the surface water element, obviously. In fact, this Friday I'm meeting with the partnerships manager that Jonathan refers to, and also coming along to that meeting is one of the highways drainage engineers who looks after the highways budget, so we can make sure that we are joined up with our discussions to really try and maximise the opportunities and identify where we need to be focusing our attention. So it's early discussions, but just to give some assurance that those discussions are happening, and that is only something that we're going to continue to take forward. And just finally on the workshop, I just wanted to say that I'm more than happy to help coordinate that through the Floods and Water team. And I think it would be really helpful to have the likes of Jonathan or colleagues from Anglian Water and others there, so we can really present that united picture, because everybody has a role to play in this, and as I've said before, it doesn't necessarily just come down to a single organisation. So I think that'd be really helpful to understand those wider issues that we've been experiencing, and more than happy to help coordinate that through the Floods and Water team. Thank you, Chairman.
Absolutely, and thank you very much indeed. Councillor Austin, you are patiently waiting.
Thank you, Chairman. One matter of concern and one positive. My concern is that I pick up emails from highways saying there's going to be a road closure here, a road closure there, not particularly in my patch, but all over the wider borough of Boston, and it always seems to be burst water mains. So that's the negative. And the positive is, I don't know if any other members did, but I sat in, if that's the right word, or listened in to the webinar regarding the, in the consultation regarding the proposed possible site of the reservoir, shall I say, and I think probably mainly because I've got a large proportion of the South 40-foot in my a sizable proportion, shall we say, in my division. So, and I knew that was going to be sort of feeding into it. So I listened really from that point of view. But it was an excellently, it was a very, very good webinar compared with one that I attempted to listen in on and gave up on with regarding the Outer Dowsing wind farm. But no, so Anglian Water, I think it's to be congratulated on that webinar.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Stone. Don't know as I actually found anything for Jonathan to respond on that, but I'll give him the opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. Well, firstly, I will feed back to the team that the webinar was very well received. Thank you very much. And just in terms of road closures, I know it's frustrating. We understand that it's a water or a water recycling issue that we're dealing with. I think it's clear from what happened this summer, though, that I think people would prefer that we deal with the burst water mains than just leave them. So they need to be dealt with, yeah, I think that sometimes that involves closing a road, unfortunately. So, but obviously we will try and do that with the least disruption as possible.
Okay, Councillor. Oh, beg your pardon. You want to come back, Councillor Austin?
Yeah, it wasn't the road closure, it was the burst of water mains literally here, there and everywhere. That's what was concerning me, the Anglian Water assets. Thank you.
Yes, that's probably the reply, to be fair. Councillor Brooks, you indicated you'd like to contribute. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I can't let that go about closing roads without bringing up the point, as Chairman of Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee, that we have numerous complaints about Anglian Water closing roads for a lot longer than they need to be closed, i.e. finishing the work and going away, and the road closures are still left on for sometimes 2 or 3 days. And it's a point we're going to be taking up with the permitting scheme report that's coming to Highways and Transport Scrutiny. But there is major criticism of Anglian Water across. I would think most members get that levelled at them, and I think Anglian Water ought to know about it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Any remark to respond with, Jonathan?
Only that I'll feed that back, Chair. I'll make sure that our team that are responsible for the kind of highway permitting that are aware of that. And just to respond on the water main point, apologies. Yes, absolutely, it's frustrating. One of the reasons we get a lot of bursts is because of ground movement, and particularly after a dry summer, and now that it's kind of wet, the grounds are wetting again, you get a lot of movement in the ground, and that's what often causes the bursts. So, and I think particularly in Lincolnshire, where you know the ground can dry out quite significantly, and then wet again quite significantly. So, but no, point taken, and I'll certainly feed that back on road closures as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Seymour, you indicated to contribute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, very much like Councillor Brooks there, road closures and time it takes to do them. Down in my area, I know the ground moves that much, and a lot of the pipes are this asbestos, the old asbestos, which cracks very easily. But in the last summer, there was a shortage, water being not too much water about. One of my parishes had problems that couldn't even shower upstairs because the water pressure was down too low. They used to have to go to friends or relations elsewhere to have a shower first thing in the morning before they go to work or anything. But I hope that is going to be fixed for this new reservoir. Thank you.
I sympathise with your residents, Councillor Seymour. Jonathan, have you got any reply that is commensurate to water pressure, please?
Not a huge amount of water pressure. I'm sorry, that's definitely not my area of expertise. Only that, you know, if you'd like to send me the details, I'm happy to send that on to the relevant team to get any further information on that as to why there might have been kind of low pressure at the time. Often we get low pressure when, you know, we might be doing work on the system. As you know, we didn't put any hose pipe bans in place over the summer, so it shouldn't have been related to a lack of water. It might have just been related to an operational issue. But yeah, happy to explore that further, or get our team to look into that if need be.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton, you've indicated to speak.
Thank you. Just picking up on a couple of points that members have raised. First of all, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Seymour, it's not just the length of road closures, it's almost the default reaction is to close a road and then see what needs to be done. And in some cases, certainly in the area that I represent, there is a small hole at the side of the road. There are road closure signs either side of it, and it completely undermines the policy of closing roads. If people see that, or people, local people being local people, realise they can get through and that the closure is frankly ridiculous, then it undermines when we absolutely need to close roads in an emergency and for a very genuine purpose. So I completely echo Councillor Brooks' point and take them that little bit further in making sure that road closure is only done when necessary, as well as for as long as it's necessary. And pick up from Councillor Seymour in respect of asbestos pipes, there are certain lengths of water pipe which tend to burst every few yards every so often. And one of these that springs to mind on a frequent journey that I undertake from down to Bourne takes me along Glenside south from Pinchbeck to West Pinchbeck near Spalding. And I mean, I've had this conversation with Councillor Sneath, whose division that is, and who lives nearby. And I think everyone has effectively lost count of the number of times that road has been closed to fix another bit of the same main that just keeps blowing in. There'll soon be more joins in that piece of pipe than there will be pipe. And I just wonder, given how precious a resource water is, given that Anglia Water's infamous motto is that they love every drop, I just wonder whether it would be, there must be a record in Anglian Water of where these pipes are and how often they are blowing. And it must be possible to understand how much it is costing to repair them on such a frequent basis, not least the disruption to local people in roads being closed repeatedly. And just on cost benefit, do the job, replace it once, rather than leak after leak and fix after fix. Thank you.
Jonathan, have you any reply that you wish to make?
Only that I understand the frustration. It's, again, I'll have to pass it on to our water team. It's not something I, as our kind of flood risk manager, would be involved in. But I completely accept the point. I mean, I presume they're fixing the burst, thinking or hoping that it's not then going to burst another foot down the road or whatever. So, but obviously, if it is, and you know, there's a problem with that, then I'm sure they would look to replace a longer length of pipe. Yeah. Again, if you want to send any details through, I'm very happy to pass it on to the relevant people and get them to investigate further.
Thank you very much. Councillor Seymour, did you want to come back and I didn't happen to catch your eye? Or has Councillor Ashton alluded to what you were going to follow on with?
I'm not quite away from that, but the parish I was alluding to is the last village in Lincolnshire, so we might get some from Cambridgeshire later on when they get their reservoir as well.
Okay, position's noted. Councillor Crawford?
Thank you, Chair. Being only a layperson, in your statement you said you were going to install more storm tanks. Could you explain to me what they are, where they would go, and how many you would be installing? Thank you.
Jonathan, over to you.
Yep, absolutely. So a storm tank is generally a large open tank that we install normally at our water recycling centres. So that's our sewage treatment works in Old Money. The reason we do that is to reduce the number of spills to the environment. So all our operations are permitted by the Environment Agency. That includes any CSOs, for example, but also both the flow and the quality of the final effluent that comes out the back end of our sewage treatment works. Now, in particular, the flow there is an important one. So often the storm tanks are installed at the water recycling centre to make sure that the flow that passes through the works is relevant to the permit that we have, and the storm tank will kind of, I suppose, hold you know, as much water as it's designed for in that storm tank, allowing the rest of the treatment process to catch up, and then that water from the storm tank will pass through the treatment process and then be discharged as final effluent. So what it's ultimately doing is reducing the amount of spills to the environment and improving the water quality of that goes out at the end. In most cases, it's just worth being aware though that those storm tanks will probably be 99% stormwater, rainwater, and a very small proportion of kind of foul effluent, as it were. So which actually can make the treatment process harder. So treatment of sewage is a natural process, and the bugs that feed on the sewage prefer it to be less dilute than more dilute. So but that's part of the kind of process that we'll run through as we go through the treatment process. So in terms of how many we're doing and where we're doing, we'll have to get back to you on that. I don't have the details. I don't think they were in that slide. So yeah, I'll have to get back to you in terms of exactly how many and where they are going. But need to say that there's a lot of them going in across a number of our water recycling centres. What I would say is that that kind of approach to managing stormwater is quite an old sort of traditional approach that uses grey infrastructure that involves pouring a lot of concrete. That includes or involves a lot of carbon, and often that water then has to be pumped out of those tanks to then be treated. So there's energy costs and more carbon costs involved in that. What I would like to see us do as an organisation, and this is where I was coming from in my presentation, and working alongside other organisations such as yourselves, is actually manage that rainwater at source rather than treating it at the kind of end of pipe. So that means, can we capture that water at the highway level or at the household level and either reuse that water or slow the flow of that water so that we're not seeing the problems at the back end, at the kind of end of pipe at our water recycling centre. So that's a far more sustainable way to capture and reuse or deal with rainwater than it is to deliver it out of sight, out of mind to the end of a pipe, stick it in a big concrete tank, and then have to pump it and treat it at the end of it. So I'd much rather see us trying to find a sustainable solution than a traditional solution. But I'm conscious that, you know, certainly the pressure that we're under as an organisation to make sure that we're not, you know, spilling to the environment and causing any harm. And obviously building a storm tank is a relatively quick solution, and one that is well known how we can do that relative to, you know, obviously maybe installing sustainable drainage or surface water management techniques in the high, you know, across a large catchment. So they serve their purpose and they have their place, but I'd much rather see us, you know, looking to the future and looking to far more sustainable means of managing that water going forward.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you very much. I think that timely makes for me to move that the verbal update and the presentation. Thank you, Jonathan, from Angling Water. Does anybody have everybody in agreement with that? Yeah, members, thank you very much. Show of hands. Yeah. Okay, fine. And for the avoidance of doubt, any dissenters? No, that's very good. Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. We look forward to welcome you to the next meeting and indeed including you in the workshop in consultation with Matthew as well.
Yes,
now, moving on to the Flood and Water Management Scrutiny Committee work programme, and over to my excellent officer on the left here, and to take any comments from the committee with the intended work programme. Kyra.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. Chiara Gattuano here, Designated Scrutiny Officer for this committee. I'd like to mention that in addition to the standing agenda items that we always have in our work programme, which include the floods team update, including Section 19 investigations, the Environment Agency update and Anglian Waters update, for the next meeting in February 2023, there has been a number of items identified from today's discussion, and these will also be added to the work programme. If there's any further topics that emerge and you feel that you would like more information to be gathered around, whether that could be dealt through a briefing statement between meetings or as an individual standalone report, please do write back to us and let us know, and we'll be more than happy to consider and include in future agendas. Councillor Morris? Apologies.
Perfectly okay. Hyphens are a bloody nuisance. Right, I wondered if we could possibly have someone that can perhaps present to us the plans that were outlined in the Eastern Daily Press about the potential barrage, the Hunstanton to Boston or Skegness barrage. Would that be a possibility for perhaps the next meeting? Obviously, it has a massive impact on a lot of the issues that we deal with, and it would be more interesting to know quite where we're up to with it.
Absolutely, that's something I can take back to discuss with officers and bring an updated position report on that. Absolutely, thank you.
Well, would it not be possible to have actually someone from the scheme to at least perhaps address us?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if we were to invite Centreport to actually come, then that would sort of be the right way forward, I think.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Councillor Seymour?
Yes, actually, going on from that point there, one thing I would definitely like to see on there is that the sewage scheme emptying into rivers, because if that ever goes ahead, there's going to be a lot more sewage going into that wash. That's coming in from Kings Lynn, Wisbech, everywhere. So it's very important that the water is clean that goes into our rivers, that if it goes into the wash. And the wash is a very big environmental thing in this area, and for fishing and everything. I think it's very important.
Yes, I would concur with the importance of the wash. entirely. I remember some 60 years ago or so when there were, in those days, some treatment that didn't, sewage supplies that did go straight into there, and great improvements have been made over many decades. So perhaps that could be a platform to be addressed within the centre point presentation, and we could actually, in the invitation, perhaps we could note that concern, Carrie. That would be lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Beg your pardon. On that, I'd like to move and note the report and approve the existing works programme. We've certainly added several appendixes to it and actions. We will be working at some of them, indeed getting a response for the next before the next full council meeting on an update with the Boston situation, and indeed I should be holding a meeting with officers as an update, so that when we come to the next meeting in February, which I do understand is some way off, it is not just following on from where we are, but we will be able to give some progress of the journey in that time. To that end, can I ask, is everybody in agreement with the programme? Members, indications? Yep. Thank you. No dissenters? Thank you very much. Okay, on that basis, I will close today's meeting. Thank you very much indeed.